this, that if you can go to, I think it's in the participants, and I just did a raised hand, and I believe that Zulema or someone who is paying attention to all the things behind the scenes, I think maybe Carolyn would see that and would say, Donna, what would you like to share? Of course, the last thing that is extremely important is throughout this self-care, we ask that you hydrate. If you need to come off screen for a moment, go get you a refresher. Just keep it flowing, and we'll look for you when you come back. And of course, move around and stretch as you need to. Okay, if we can move to hopes. Again, for those who are just joining us, I welcome you on behalf of the National Parent Leadership Institute to our parent policy table. I want to give the context of how we have come to do this, because we recognize that parents should be at every decision-making table in the world of parent leadership, particularly with PLTI in our foundation of PLTI, the Parent Leadership Training Institute. We recognize that communities, as well as policy and practice, should be informed by parents, by families. And so we have often invited parents to be at different tables across the nation. You have been leading tables in your corner of the nation, as well as sometimes creating the opportunity for a table to occur. And so we gathered at this policy table in the virtual space because we recognize that oftentimes we don't need to wait to be invited, that we as parents, as leaders, actually can invite others to hear from us. We have the right to bring parent voice and set policy agenda, and to share with civic leaders and system leaders and agencies and community leaders what we believe is important for our children and for our families to thrive in our democracy. So we're excited to welcome you to, I think this is our 4th parent policy table. I always say I'm inspired when the concept came to be, particularly from Melvette Hill, who will be moderating this evening. I thought about one of my democracy sheroes, Shirley Chisholm. And Shirley Chisholm said, you know what, if you're not invited, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So tonight, I don't know if you can see it, I wear a folding chair pin in honor of Shirley Chisholm. And all the parent leaders who have pulled up your own chairs. And I welcome you in this virtual table, but where you definitely have a seat at the table, as well as it is your table. With PLTI, thank you. With PLTI and all of our gathering spaces, even for the National Parent Leadership Institute, we operate from a place of hope and a place of hopes. We honor every voice that is here, every parent leader, and we honor difference. We also recognize that it's something brave that we must do at times as leaders, and that is to ask for help as well as to offer help. O is simply for everyone to be open and honest. And in doing so, we recognize that sometimes something might be said, something might be done that feels a little bit uncomfortable, and we make space for ouch. And if there's an ouch, we ask that you put it in the chat so that we can address it appropriately. We invite everyone to participate. There will be a lot of listening this evening, but you're listening to the voice of fellow parent leaders. And you will be able to, at times, respond in the chat, as well as through the polls, inserting your voice into this conversation. But what's even extra special is the conversation doesn't end here tonight. This is just the start. So you'll receive an actual opportunity for input form where you'll be able to share some of your thoughts around policies that Mr. Biden, our president, needs to focus on along with his cabinet. Hopefully you won't want to pass tonight. There won't be any small group discussions, but we're hoping that everyone will actively participate, and even if it's from that leadership position of active listening. In order for you to really hear one another, we use the Spanish word escuchar, which means to listen, not just to hear, but to really listen in order that you can gain from each other's experiences. We seek to create a sensitive as well as a safe space, meaning a confidential space. But we know that the safe space happens together in partnership. So the first invite we ask you to do in the chat is just to note what you would need for this evening, for this conversation to feel safe for you as we go forward. And now we will move forward. I am honored to introduce Melvette Hill, who is our moderator for the evening. Melvette is an amazing parent leader. She's a graduate of Danbury PLTI, and she actually serves as the lead director for Connecticut State PLTI. But the joy that I have is that she is so multifaceted. She is also our policy, partnership, and communications consultant for this work, and she is the convener and lead moderator for our parent policy tables. Melvette Hill, thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna, and thank you all for being here tonight. We're going to get right into it. And so we're also in PLTI, we like to celebrate mistakes, right? And so sometimes we have technical issues, but we thank you for your patience in working through that. So we are here finally in the year 2021, and it has brought many new things to families. However, we also know that some policies and practices will remain the same. And that will require what? Renewed advocacy on your part, on my part, on all of our parts, right? Parent leaders across the United States will continue to advocate for themselves and for their children and for their families. And so we enter this new year, 2020, right? We're here with renewed hope and great expectations. We believe and we strive for the new. That sounds so familiar, right? It is, because for those of you who saw our New Year's message from our executive director, she talked about the new year. And that message, I think, is a great backdrop and frame for our roundtable today, right? 2020 brings new opportunities for parent leadership and democracy. And as we imagine and consider new solutions for issues concerning families, our communities, and our country, solutions happen where? In community. And solutions start with us, with all of us. And so new endeavors, we're all about exploring more equitable systems and structures that impact education, safety, and health for our children, our families, and redesigning. Hear me when I say redesigning and reinvigorating to bring equity for the most marginalized and disenfranchised people in our country. New anti-racist policies and practices need to confront and dismantle the system of racism in our country. A new reconstruction. How many of you have heard about reconstruction? Well, we need a new reconstruction, restructuring to become the United States of America that we ought to be. We need new insights as we seek to restore the wellness of our people and our families, mind, body, and spirit. And so here we are today. We have a fabulous panel, and I would like to introduce them to you. So our first panelist, if we can go to the next slide, is Dominic Cummings. Okay, or maybe it's, yeah, there's Dominic. He's on the screen. Dominic Cummings is a parent leader. He's a father, a husband, and a civic leader. He's the school advisory president for his daughter's school, and he is the first Black male advisory president. He is also PTA president. Dominic is married to his wife, Rhonda, and together they have 4 children. And our next panelist, if we can go to that slide, just want to make sure we're right, Jamila Hanif. She was born and raised in Oakland, California. She's an early childhood educator and community leader. Jamila knows what it's like to grow up as a child faced daily with adversity. For the past 8 years as a single mother, she has operated her QRIS 5-star rated family home childcare. I am slowing down for language justice. No one has told me to slow down, but I know I speak rapidly. So I'm going to slow down so that we make sure that the interpreters are getting this and it's in the chat. So just doing a little self-monitoring. Thank you. I have hearts from the interpreters. She also is the executive director of Watch Me Grow Incorporated, a nonprofit that embraces an innovative, culturally sensitive, trauma-informed, strengthened families approach to meet the gaps in resources and services and effectively engage families in early childhood education and advocacy. She is also the founder and host of Bounce Back Wednesdays. Bounce Back Wednesdays is a live discussion held on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday, 6 p.m. To 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You should check it. Right now, you need to go to Facebook, like Jamila, and follow Bounce Back Wednesdays. It's awesome. So she does this Bounce Back Wednesdays to raise awareness about ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. She's a strong advocate who puts in the work to strengthen the child, family, and community. Welcome, Jamila. And our next panelist is Elizabeth. Elizabeth Mountier is a Latina mother scholar and first generation college graduate. Yay. She currently serves as a college access coordinator in Kansas City, and she is passionate about the arts, college access, and educational equity for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are students and their families. Welcome, Elizabeth. And finally, let's go back to that other slide. We have Nessie Rodriguez. I like to call her Nessie. I know her well, so you'll hear me call her Nessie throughout. And I think it's earlier, your slide that you're looking for. She is a parent leader. She's a certified master coach. She's a certified business consultant. She's a speaker, author, business enthusiast, and state and federally licensed financial expert, inspiring clients toward financial independence. She worked over 10 years in the community serving victims of domestic violence, and she transitioned into finances after realizing that one of the main causes of domestic violence was financial, and that these victims were staying in toxic relationships because of the financial obligations. They couldn't be self-sufficient on their own. She is passionate about helping and strengthening her community's assets through personal development and leadership development. And so if we can give a round of applause, thank you, a round of applause for our panelists today. And we are going to get right into it.
Excuse me, Melvette.
Yes.
In order for us to focus on our panelists, I'm inviting everyone to go off screen until we invite you back on. We want you to stay fully focused though, but we just want you can take an eye break in order just to focus in on the panelists.
Yes. So I'm going to stay on screen with the panelists as the moderator, but we invite all of you just to go off camera for a little while so that they can be highlighted. Okay, and I think just for 1 second, just for our visual learners and people who get information that way, if we can put that question slide back up, I'll say it and then we can take it down. So the question for our panelists, we're gonna have this first round of panel, is as a parent, what policy issues would you like the new administration to focus on? If you could sit down with President Biden, what would you tell him? And you can see it's there also in Espanol. Gracias. Okay. So we could take that down. Let's go back to gallery view so we can see our panelists. And we're going to ask everyone, if you can, just to turn off your cameras. So our panelists are Elizabeth and Nessie and Dominic. And I'm missing one. Where's my other panelist? I don't see you. Maybe on another page. Okay, well, let's get started. So I'm going to go to Jamila. If you're there, we would love to hear from you first. Do we have Jamila? As a parent, what policy issues would you like the new administration to focus on? Okay, we'll come back to Jamila because I don't see her in the space. Maybe she had bad internet connection. Let's go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you, Melvette. So I'm Elizabeth Mountier. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm really excited to be in community with all the other parent leaders and supporters and advocates here, especially my PLTI Kansas City family that joined. I'm glad you all could make it. I want to start off by saying, I'm an educator. So something really near and dear.
I can't hear her.
Oh. Okay. Just make sure at the bottom of your screen, the person who can't hear, select your language. There's a little globe, and maybe that's why you can't hear. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Sorry about that. So, yeah, I mean, I was just saying I'm an educator, so something really near and dear to my heart is education, right? And I think about a pedagogy from, or teaching philosophy from Africa that's called Ubuntu. And there's a saying that goes, I exist because we exist, right? And so this interconnectedness between, just on a humanistic level, of who we are as humans. And so when my students are suffering and their families are suffering, we all are suffering, right? And so I would tell President Biden to really just, look at the funding in education, and change it to a more equitable one, right? And give our students the opportunity to realize their potential. There's so many things that are possible in the minds of students right now. And just the way that the school system, being in the weeds of it, and going to schools every day that lack proper resources, proper student support services, proper mental health services, all of these things, it's really heartbreaking. And in order to really solve that is more equitable funding, especially from, when you think about it in a racial equity lens as well. I know one of the things that Biden said to Trump during the one of the presidential debates was, he asked him to condemn white supremacy, right? But condemning it and saying it in words is not enough. We have to do that with action and policy. So to condemn white supremacy with policy as well, because a lot of this historic practice really stems from that, and it's not something that happened 4 years ago. It's something that has gone on for hundreds of years. So.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And in your work, you do college access, right? And so, what would be a pathway? If we had equitable funding, if we dream that big dream of equitable funding for education from preschool all the way through, how would equitable funding then affect college access for students?
Yeah, so one of the things that that I think the United States really needs to catch up with is um, access to college for all, right? So free college to students to be able to pursue their dreams. And I mean, this is already happening in other places in the world, right? And so, and the other thing that this would solve is how we often re-traumatize our students by asking them to put all of their hurts and pains and say, hey, look at me as a human, recognize my humanity in their essays. And if if college was free, we wouldn't even have to do that, right? And we would say, hey, I recognize that you deserve opportunity.
Yes. Thank you, Elizabeth. I see we have Jamila back in the space. Welcome back. I know there's like crazy internet issues, but I ask you the same question as a parent. What policy issues would you like the new administration to focus on? I know we discussed a lot, but choose one of them, maybe two right now, to share with us. What's the most pressing thing that you feel that President Biden needs to know?
As a parent, I would say increase childcare vouchers for more childcare slots for families. You have a lot of families who don't have access to childcare right now because there aren't enough slots for funding. I know here in Vallejo or here in California, there are 2.3 million children who are income eligible to receive subsidized childcare, but we don't have the funding for it. And 86% of those children are children of color. And so that's what the data shows. And I mean, as a parent, I want my child to have access to childcare, especially if you're a parent who is low income. Children who are in higher income homes, who families can provide that support for them, those children, data shows that by the first day of kindergarten, that those children are 2 years ahead already in language compared to a child that is in a low income family home. And there's data that also shows that a child who is behind in reading by fourth grade, that they are 13 times as likely to drop out of high school. And when you're dropping out of high school, then you're 50% more likely to become unemployed, and 8 times likely to be incarcerated. So we need to invest in more funding so that families could have access to childcare.
Yeah, thank you. And I would imagine, in some cities or states around the country that there's childcare subsidies for working families, for families who are working. But I know also in some states, like in Connecticut, whether if you're in college or you're in a training, if you're going into some kind of technical training program, they don't have the same ability to get childcare subsidies. And so it seems like, I wonder if there's that imbalance across the country, if all states are actually offering, childcare subsidies for working parents as well as those who are in post-secondary education. Is that something that's part of your advocacy work or you're looking to do?
Yes, I mean it should be available nationwide, because it shouldn't depend on like the family, their income, or I'm saying all children should have access to childcare. It's about the child. It's about our workforce. It's about our future, and that all depends on our child getting quality care and early childhood education.
Thank you, Jamila. I love how you connected preschool education and childcare to workforce, right? It's a longer pipeline. People aren't thinking that the investment in preschool is actually building our workforce for later, for a generation later. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go to Dominic next. Same question.
Good evening, everyone. I really feel like what I have to say really kind of ties in with the other two panelists. I am a proud father and I'm a proud husband, and my mind goes back to March when the pandemic first happened. During the first day of students actually learning from home, my wife and I had to take time off of work to kind of get her set up. On the very first day, my daughter was the only child online logged in. On the second day, she was the only child. On the third, out of 19 students, on the third day, it was one other student. By the next week, it was only maybe 3 to 5 students. And by the end of the year, only half of the students had checked in at some point online throughout the school year while students learn from home. If I had the opportunity to sit down with President Biden, it would be to discuss school support services. I believe that all students that are not performing at grade level, they need that additional assistance. They need tutoring, they need mentors, they need one-on-one help. And quite frankly, while our teachers are the bedrock of our community, while the teachers are doing the very, very best they can, they don't have the opportunity to sit down with each child one by one. While I was in college, I had the opportunity to work alongside teachers at an elementary school where I would pull low performing students out of class and have small sessions. I would have the opportunity to reshare the lesson that was previously taught. After each day, each week, the teachers would run me down and say, "Thank you so much," because I didn't have the time to go back over that lesson because the curriculum calls for the next thing each and every day. So there are so many students that fall between the cracks. I think about my own family. I have a nephew who is 14 years old in the 5th grade. I have another nephew that is 15 years old in the 7th grade. I'm not saying that the school failed them. I'm not saying that the parents failed them. I just believe that they both need additional help and resources. Um, there's so much that needs to happen at home. I think about the opportunity when my daughter was home and we had to teach her. It was a lot for us to teach the lesson, not being educated. And I think about a teacher having to adapt to learn 15 to 30 students, different learning styles. And quite frankly, I believe the teachers don't get enough credit and they don't get enough help and support as they need to. That is something I would love to talk to President Biden about.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominic. And I'm going to go to Nessie. Nessie, same question. I mean, it seems like we have a thread here that's centering in education, but what would you add here?
Absolutely. I think that, for me, it would be a little bit more specific as to what we would add in our education. There is a plethora of, topics that we could definitely implement, but I would say, dear Mr. President Biden, one of the important things that we need to implement into our school system is financial literacy. And I'm not just saying, to include a extracurricular class. What I would like to see is something that's implemented and mandated as part of that curriculum for the schools, not just in high school, but also pre-K, as Jamila and I were talking previously, from pre-K to 12. There's a lot of statistics out there, and nationally, there's only 43 states right now that have a financial literacy standard, and only 17 of them have a high school course. Out of those 17, only 6 of them require a test, and only 3 states require all 3. And so it's so unfortunate, because then we start seeing that ripple effect going into adulthood, right? And so many times when we don't educate our children on what financial literacy is, we start seeing that the families falling into poverty. And similar to what Dominic had said, this pandemic really showed us how unprepared we are as a community, especially in urban communities, when it comes to our finances. And so I would love President Biden to implement and develop something among the financial literacy. Of course, we have the life management, where we have health and driver's education, and social emotional learning. But financial literacy is just as equally important. Our world, this is not just a national issue, this is a global issue. And our world revolves around money, yet we don't talk about it enough. And I believe that if we implement something like this, we can definitely make drastic changes into our kids' future.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that probably every single person on this call probably could agree with that, right? That, sometimes we're learning finances as adults, and sometimes it's at a point where we're so far behind, right? We're trying to dig ourselves out of something as opposed to building. So I think that's awesome. And we talked about that, right? Like even in preschool, Jamila was saying, even in preschool, start teaching children about finances, about money, which is important, especially if our country is a capitalistic country. If that's the way things work, then we should probably be doing that. I think that I see there's a lot of stuff in the chat, and I want to ask Sulema, if you can come on screen. Do we need to address some of the things in the chat, or are we going to go to a poll? Because I know we have a poll that's waiting. Where are we going?
Yeah, so I'll just highlight a few of the things that the parents were saying around some of the policy issues or issues they'd like to see addressed around education. But we certainly saw a lot of agreement with some of what the panelists were saying. Parents are wanting to see here universal early childhood education opportunities, after school opportunities, enhanced supports for teachers as well, child care vouchers, this issue of internet access. We know that a lot of families, especially in our rural communities, do not have adequate access to the internet. So we had a parent leader really call attention to that. And then life skills, here in agreement with Nessie's comment. And I think this thread that we see throughout around the dehumanizing of families through the lack of just meeting these needs, education needs, and other basic needs of families, and the way that feels, it feels dehumanizing to not have these needs met. And then we can have, I think there was a hand, Georgina had her hand up, if you want to take that, and then we can have Carolyn do our poll as well.
Okay, Georgina, we saw you had your hand up. Are you still wanting to ask a question or make a comment? And it's a brief comment, right? It's maybe a minute, 60 seconds. Are you with us, Georgina? You have to unmute your line. Okay.
While they're coming online, Melvet, can I say something really quickly?
Yes, sir.
So, as I was thinking about everything that has been said so far, I realized it sounds like we're putting a lot of pressure on our school system. We know they're overworked with a lot of students, but I really feel like the district, as well as the cities and local principalities, should partner up with other nonprofits who are already doing the work. The wheel doesn't have to be recreated. When I think about here in my city, here in Jacksonville, I think about an organization that works with literacy, communities, and schools. Um, Someone else mentioned financial literacy. There's a program here called Junior Achievement that teaches students financial responsibility. How does money work? How does our economy work? And things like that. So I really think that there are nonprofits out there already doing the work. I just believe that they need additional exposure and partnering with our school systems.
Thank you, Dominic. And we're going to invite everyone now to turn back on their cameras. Carolyn's going to launch a poll for us. We would love to get some feedback from you to see where we're all sitting in this conversation. And you should all see this poll on your screen. I see people are beginning to respond to it. The first question, do you agree that the federal government should focus on education policies and supports? And then the second question, should the federal government address the increased inequity in education / access that has emerged as a result of the pandemic? We're getting good responses in here. We'll leave that up for about 45 more seconds. We'd love to hear from most of you. It looks like we have about 75 people in the space. We have about 54 respondents. Come on, everybody, let's do this. This is your opportunity to participate. Some of you are in the chat. This is also another way that you can participate, have a voice in the room. Okay, and I think we've stopped at about 50. Oh, we're there. What we're going to do is we're going to keep the poll up. When we come back, we will share the results. We're going to take a 3-minute break here because it's important for you to get up, stretch around, maybe check in on a child or a pet. But we're going to break for about 3 minutes. We'll play some music. When you hear the music stop, let's come on back. And we will see you in 3 minutes. So join us back at 7, let's do 7:19. Or 19 after the hour, wherever you are, 19 after the hour. Zulema, música, por favor. Yes, habla español un poquito. No bueno.
There's more to life than trying to be young all the time. I'm looking for some way to love you right, my darling girl. Where did you come from? And how are you? Not a grand design. Some think it's just witchcraft, but I think it's more than that, 'cause I think there's stronger magic at hand. Stronger magic, stronger magic, stronger magic, stronger magic. There must be some little trick it's just witchcraft, but I think it's more than that, 'cause I think there's stronger magic at hand. Stronger magic. 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 Stronger magic.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
When it was crumbs, scraps, pennies, pats, everything was fine. You treat me like a loaded gun when I ask for what is mine. Always try to dim my light, no matter how bright I shine. But I've got my standards, and I'm never letting die. Not because of pride, you're not bleeding me dry. Cannot abide. I got my head on a swivel.
Okay, we're coming back. We are coming back. Hello, everyone. Hello. And oh, look at the responses. Zulema, what do those responses say?
I can't see the polls on my end,
Oh,
so I'm
it's
the
okay.
wrong
I can
person
see
to
them.
add.
I can see them. I was just inviting your voice. I love it. I love hearing your voice. So for the first question, do you agree that the federal government should focus on education policies and supports? I probably should turn my camera on. And let's see, 100% of the respondents, we had 61 people say yes. Yes, they agree with that. For the second question, should the federal government address the increase in equity in education and access that has emerged as a result of the pandemic? 61 folks, yeah, 100% said yes. So thank you so much for your participation in that. Yep. And can everyone see the results on the screen? Give me a thumbs up so I can see that you see. Great. Oh, I see a little thumbs up there. Oh, awesome. Okay, so we're at round 2 for the panel, and we will have time to invite some of your responses as well. So I want to, if we can all go off camera again, except for myself and the panelists, but we can turn off our cameras so that we can highlight our panelists again so they can be on screen. Okay, there we are. So same question that we're working with, what is it that we want our President Biden to know about our concerns, what concerns us for our children and our families. One of the things that, aside from education as a major topic.
Yeah, it looks bad out there.
Most people agree with that, especially parents, people who have children. But there are also things that kind of emerged. We talked about financial literacy. We also talked about a number of supports, that really all link to funding. And so I'm wondering then if we're looking at the economy, and we've been through now 2 rounds of stimulus checks for those who received them. And some people are getting back to work. The economy is still an issue, whether you're entrepreneur or if you're working for another organization, whether it's government, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. Still families are trying to make it. And so we had this discussion a little bit about livable wages. And so I wanted to kind of open that up to our panelists. their thoughts on, where is this in your scale of 1 to 10 or your top 10 for issues that you feel the president needs to address. Livable wages and equitable pay. So I'm going to open it up. Let's go to Nessie.
That's a great question, and I really believe that they definitely needs to put that, in a top priority, because it's not so much how much money you're making, it's also how much money we're keeping. Especially with taxes and the way the money continues to grow. We used to be able to live off $10 an hour when milk was maybe $1 and gas was $1, but when milk is going up to $3, $4, and I'm talking, minor things, because obviously, this impacts on such a grander level. But I definitely believe that this is something that they need to start focusing on, and it's something that comes along with that financial literacy, and that economic development. We definitely need to focus on, being able to provide our society a little bit more. We continue to see the richer get richer, the poorer get poorer, but we're not compensating our families. So, in my opinion, yes, that definitely ranks on a 10 from the scale of 1 to 10.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Jamila. You had some very strong opinions about equitable pay, especially in the field of childcare.
Yes, you have the way the family is structured right now. I mean, back in the day, it was, most of the households were two-parent household. You have two incomes. That was a while ago, say like in the 1950s. It's data that showed that the workforce was 12% women. And there was data showing back in 2017 that now there are 65% of women in the workforce, because back in the day, women would be the ones staying home, but that's not possible now. You have parents who need to work because they want to provide childcare for their children, which data shows that in 28 states, to put a child through childcare, it costs more or the same amount as putting a child through community college. So no parent should have to choose between, food in their home or even work, and not being able to provide for their family. I mean, basic needs have to be met. I mean, they have to be met. We have children who aren't eating. How does adults feel when we're hungry? We get mad, we're upset, then we have children who can't focus on learning. It's a lot. Basic needs need to be met, and families should be able to make livable wages to be able to provide for their families.
Thank you, Jamila. And Elizabeth, I'm going to open it up to you if you want to continue, or if there was something else that you wanted to open up to the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think livable wages would not only pour into the families, but it would also give them time to actually spend with their kids, right? Like I said before, I'm an educator, so I know parents that work 2 to sometimes 3 jobs. And if you're working that many jobs, how can you go to parent-teacher conferences? How can you go to PTA meetings, right? And so having a livable wage allows those families to be more engaged with their child and with their child's needs, social emotional needs. And it's not only up to the school system, right? It's holistic, right? And recognizing that all of this is just really interconnected in a system that is honestly designed this way to perpetuate inequities. We have to change that.
Yeah, thank you. You brought up some really good points. there. And you know, makes me think about you know, parents working harder and harder, whether you're a single parent or there are two parents in the household, or even caregivers, right? You know, families look different. There are different structures. We have multi-generational households now where you know, grandparents and, you know, and grandchildren and parents and aunts and uncles all living together because of the necessity to support one another, but also to save money, right? And to have resources together. It reminds me that with all this hard working that families are doing, there's less time for them to spend with their children, right? Nurturing time, also, you know, pouring into them, you know, legacy and traditions and all the things that many of us hold dear. And then also that additional support on with school, right? With schoolwork. And so we look at a time where we're still in the midst of a pandemic, and we wonder then if President Biden truly understands. I know he has grandchildren himself. The effects of what's happening in our country, the effects that it's having on our children. And so you all, in some of our conversations leading up to this, have shared some of your concerns with, you know, the adverse effects that the pandemic and the civil unrest and insurrection at the Capitol, the images that our children are seeing and the things that they're hearing. What are the effects that they are having on our children, and how then will the administration address that? So I want to go, I would love to hear from Dominic first and then Jamila on this.
All right, thank you for opening it up. Um, the things that we've seen in the last, sadly to say, 4 years has been disheartening. It really does feel like a repeat of the past. I believe our new up and coming administration should really take hold um, of everything that's happened, especially on the 6th. It really taught us that there still is racism that exists here in our country. There still is bigotry. There still is unfairness. There still is racial discrimination. Um, and as administration, they should really think about what should happen next. I also believe that an examples should be made. I was happy to see that the FBI did decide to prosecute some of those who defaced our Capitol, who rioted and did things that were unconstitutional. I believe that we have more examples of people who exhibit this type of behavior. Hopefully, we can get somewhere and see that their actions are not acceptable as they might have been with our previous administration.
Thank you. And and then Jamila, are you there? Are you able to respond briefly? I'm not sure if you're frozen. If you could give us a quick response.
Was it me? My you guys, my internet is just, I apologize.
It's okay.
What was the question again?
Yeah, so this is where we were talking about ACEs and how the administration is going to address ACEs in the midst of everything that's happening in the country. So you can give us like a brief response, and then we want to hear from the audience as well.
Yes. So ACEs, I actually do a show every Wednesday on Facebook. It's under Joyful Jamila. It's called Bounce Back Wednesdays. And I'm talking about I'm raising awareness around ACEs. For those of you who don't know, ACEs it's an acronym. It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And there was a study that was conducted by Kaiser and the CDC. And what they found that a lot of our health outcomes, negative health outcomes, was resulted from our adverse childhood experiences. And right now we have children who are dealing with a lot. It's all linked to toxic stress. So just imagine being a child in a child care program where there's a lot of kids, it's a lot of noise around, and you're trying to focus on school. That's stressful. I've heard about a lot of child abuse calls and everything has increased, and that's stressful. I'm sure there's an increase in the domestic violence rates, and that's all toxic stress when children are in those environments. It's stressful, and it needs to be tackled. They need to really provide funding also towards mental health and getting families and children the support they need that will help them mentally.
Yes, thank you, Jamila. I think something that everyone it would be good for people to understand that with this ACE study, really it's a survey, it's a questionnaire, and it asks you about different things you might have experienced as a child. And if for every yes, it's a point. And so right now, right, 2020 into 2021, we can say that every single child in the United States experienced an adverse childhood experience. They experienced COVID-19. I'm not sure for anyone that was a happy experience, right? And so I think that people understanding that, and us pushing forward with, well, what are we going to do to help our children, right? Elizabeth, you said something really great about the learning gap, and then I want to go into questions from the audience. I'm not sure if you remember the fantastic quote. I wrote it down, but we talked
Yeah.
about the learning gap. Like, what do we want them to do about this learning gap? And your point of view was?
Well, I mean, my point of view, it's from uh, I can't remember her name. Somebody in the chat might know, but she talks about the learning gap is or this achievement gap is actually an educational debt that we have owed our students, especially students of color, students from underserved, marginalized communities, for a really long time, right? And it wasn't even pre-pandemic. This was existing, and so really yes, Gloria Ladson Billings, that's who it is. So shout out to Rashida for that. So if you all have time and you need to, if you're interested in learning more, definitely look up the work from Miss Gloria, because it's really powerful.
Yeah, it's good because you said learning gap puts the responsibility on the student, education debt puts responsibility on the adults. Yeah, that's wonderful. So Sulema, if you can come on camera, and we want to check out if we have any questions in the chat or any hands raised. We want to open it up to some comments on what our audience might think are important issues. I saw something there like housing, which is big stuff, right? Housing and homelessness. And housing insecurity, those things are big. What else do we have going on there?
Yeah, so I think if for the questions, we would want to open it up to folks to raise their hand. I didn't see any hands raised, but just calling attention to a few of the things we saw in the chat. So specifically around the income inequalities, to address the racist policies, right? The systemic racism that does keep income inequalities alive in our communities. And then even specifically to the housing, we did see apparently, or that shared that in some communities, half of a family's income goes to housing, and in some it's even more. So definitely affordable housing would be something that should be addressed there.
Yeah,
and then this.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to invite everyone to come back on camera. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and definitely this shift in focusing away from the $15 minimum wage and again into a living wage, because that's going to vary by community. $15 does not go very far in many of our states, and in some that might work. It just depends. And so that living wage, language is showing up quite a bit here as well.
Awesome. And I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to ask you to hold for just a moment, Dominic, because we want to make sure that we hear the other voices in the room. And so I just want to check to make sure there are no hands raised. I see Janine McMahon has her hand raised. Janine, if you can unmute.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Janine. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. I just wanted to say one of the things to me that COVID highlighted was the fact that the two-generational approach, which is something that we've been working on here in Connecticut and other states have been working on as well, is so important more now more so than ever, because this pandemic is a whole family issue, and a lot of the things that I've heard our participants discuss this evening when it comes to financial literacy and some of the comments about housing and, livable wages. Right now, we're working on our workforce group, working on, sustainability, sustainable living wages for families, careers that families could be jumping into as opposed to just like, regular jobs. And then we're tackling benefits cliff and how all of these things intersect. And I think if I had the opportunity to talk to President Biden, it would be an opportunity to highlight the work that we've been doing in our two generational initiative and kind of make that standard across the country and have this whole family approach to services so that our families could really thrive and we could have equitable outcomes for children and families.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you. And then I see Rashida. And Rashida, before you unmute, I'm going to ask Carolyn to launch a poll there that we have so we can get some more voices in the room. Rashida, welcome. Please unmute. Let's hear what you have to say.
Hello, everyone. I am Rashida Likely, and I'm very excited to be here supporting my friend, Dominic Cummings. And I am a professor at Kennesaw State University in science education. So I have a group of pre-service teachers who will be out teaching our young children in kindergarten to fifth grade in the upcoming year. And particularly with the pandemic, it has been just a disruption on every level, some good disruptions, because a lot of the inequalities that a lot of us have seen consistently over time, they have been enhanced to a point where everyone now realizes all of our children don't have internet access. All of our children are not getting rest. All of our children are not eating. All of our children don't have clean clothes. And these are all conversations many of us might have been having in private spaces, but now all of us are dealing with together. And so it has been interesting is the least favorite word to use, but also it's been very challenging to focus on, for me, science education when it's a larger issue, a systemic problem. Students showing up to class with just questions, some of them being personally affected by COVID, others of them being personally affected by loss of income. And how does that affect pre-service teachers? How does that affect current teachers? How does that affect resources for teachers in general on the larger scale? No one taught me how to teach online. So I was teaching in the classroom. So even for me as a teacher educator, how do I necessarily adjust my instruction for this moment? Because I don't think we can ever go back to whatever normal was. So even with some of these experiences, I think it has been very helpful to, one, listen to our children, listen to our parents, and still continue to push on those elected officials to get justice and find equity and equality for our most vulnerable populations, including our children. So thank you. I'm really excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rashida. And thank you for your voice being in this space. And so I want to go to our poll. I just want to do a little housekeeping. So we have someone who's going to respond to what we've heard today and and also read in the chat and heard in the chat, as well as what the panelists have offered. So I want to make sure that we have time to do that, because the parent policy table is about the parents being the experts and then inviting policymakers and legislators to the table. And so we have a policymaker here with us, and we want to make sure that we allow time for her to respond to what she's heard. So I want to take a look at the poll here really quick. And it says, which of the following policy issues should the Biden administration focus on? And livable wages was up there. Racial equity, that's a big one. Affordable housing, affordable quality childcare, entrepreneurship. Yes, entrepreneurship, that's great. So thank you so much. Economic mobility, thank you so much for that. And I think we're sharing the results on the screen. Racial equity won out. This is very telling. And so if you have your hand raised, I'm just going to ask you to lower it, because we are going to have to go into the next phase of our policy table. But hold on to your comments. There will be time where you can use your voice or maybe put it in the chat And so we just want to be equitable here, right? And so when we do invite people to the table, we want to give them a chance, right? So here's our responder. So I'm going to turn it over to Donna Thompson Bennett to introduce our responder.
Thank you, Melvette. And for many of you, really, this person needs no introduction. Elaine Zimmerman currently serves as the region administrator for New England for the Administration of Children and Families, 6 states that are within New England. But I will say, we are really honored that she's here because she is a leading listener. The very work that you guys are all representing in terms of parent leadership is because when Elaine was charged in her role as executive director for the Commission on Children here in Connecticut, she went out to hear from people in community and particularly listened to parent leaders around what they thought should happen around school readiness for their children. And because of her listening, she heard not only their great ideas, but she also heard their civic distrust, their civic hesitancy. And as a result of that, in going back and continuing that dialogue, she helped to develop and was the lead founder and writer for the Parent Leadership Training Institute. So the parent leaders who've shared this evening are graduates of this institute across the nation, but started right here in Connecticut because of a leader who listened, believes in family civics, family and parent voice, as well as is a champion for children. And so everything that you've shared this evening aligns with her looking at trends, analyzing, and then impacting through policy framing that has actually moved legislation forward here in Connecticut. And so I am honored that she's here in her national role with the Administration of Children and Families to be able to respond to what your concerns are for this new administration. Elaine, welcome.
Thank you so much, Donna. I really appreciate that. And I'm just so grateful to be here. I want to thank Nessie and Dominique and Jamila and Elizabeth and Janine and Rashida for these comments. You know, we're in a really interesting place nationally right now. The truth is that often people don't want to know what parents think. And that has been the case for so very long, that people act as if they want to know what the family thinks, but actually often government and nonprofits act as if they're the family. And they, you know, you'll go to a hearing and somebody will present as if they know what the family is, but the families aren't there. And it takes parents leading and sharing your stories that will make the difference in law. And so often laws are created that aren't actually helpful to families because they didn't ask parents. So this evening is so important and historic, and I'm so grateful for it. And I think that the focus on financial literacy, family supports, pre-K, and really thinking about bouncing back and ACEs, equity in learning. When Janine talked about benefit cliffs and 2-generational practice, and the focus on race equity across all these domains, and particularly in education, is all critical. What's really important now is that there's really room in the Biden administration for parent voice. And there's room right now for parents to say what needs to happen. Now, it often takes Congress to pass legislation, but President Biden has moved some executive orders. And the executive orders are, you know, it's a little bit like when you think about a governor who makes a state of the state and positions his or her view when they're newly elected. An executive order positions the values of the new president and also positions how he's going to do things, how he or she, in this case, President Biden. But the good news here is that the executive orders, and I brought 4 of them, these executive orders really, they put a circle, they almost put a hug around the policies that you are prioritizing. There's an executive order that supports the reopening and continuing operation of schools and early childhood education. And Jamila, it's focused on pre-K, it's focused on family daycare providers, and it's also focused explicitly on race inequities and addressing that and using data, which you so eloquently talked to earlier. So that, and I'm going to make sure that you have a copy of this with various highlights that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight and give to Melvette this executive order so you can actually see exactly the sorts of things that fit with what you're talking about and prioritizing. There's also an executive order that's on economic relief and related to the pandemic. And what's really important here is that this mandates that we use data differently. And you all have been giving fabulous examples of data tonight. And the focus on data and using numbers and really focusing on science and research and demographics and trends that we experience and that we see are now being silhouetted, elevated, and are valued. And it's also inextricably linked to institutional racism, because the focus now is we need to look at data totally differently than we looked at before. We really need to be looking at who's affected, who's getting services, who's not getting services. And that's a stream of your conversation tonight, today, depending on what part of the country you're in. There's also an executive order that I'm very excited about that's advancing race equity and support for underserved communities. And the president is actually requiring every agency to look at the systemic racism within the agency, the structures that need to be changed, what's in the way, what are the systemic racist barriers that are keeping opportunity and equity. And he's actually asking for policy recommendations to how to turn these things around. And so you addressed some of them tonight. I think there's more opportunity as parent leaders. He's actually setting up an equity data working group. One thought I had is, Donna, that it's going to be very important for people to articulate that parents need to be on these groups that are being set up, that it's important for there to be certain experts and from different states, but that parents are experts, both in and of themselves in lived experience, but also in policy. Certainly you all are. And then there's another executive order that is on ensuring equity in the pandemic response. So it's very focused on COVID. But in all of them, there's a new focus on health equity, on data. It's sown with a commitment to real systems reform in education and a real look at livable wage. I think that, to Janine's point, thinking about this across generation, we saw with COVID that we were dealing with elders and our children concurrently, and that parents and the family were the center of the whole story. So the more we can use parent stories, parent narratives, the way Dominique told the story of his child at school, and that there would be 3 people because so many didn't have internet, didn't have those skills, the parents couldn't assist, and the need for family support. All of that is present now. So we have really an uncharted opportunity right now. It's sad, the reasons are sad, we all know that. But here we are, there's actually in these executive orders requirements to find out what the public is saying, to find out what parents are saying. And so Donna, I think as the head of NPLI, the opportunity to turn this into a really classy letter to the governor, to the president, maybe with copies to governors, that's where I was going, and with copies to members of Congress, so that the parent voice becomes something that is expected. And I think the letter, I would recommend that the letter actually act as if it's in response to these executive orders. In other words, President Biden, you've asked for what the public thinks. We as parents want you to know what we think. And these are some of the areas. And if you align it with the executive orders, one, you're showing you know your stuff. And I'm certainly glad to send it all and share it all, because I know you'll share it right away. But it aligns with a moment in history that is right now. That's both an intersection of, they're calling it, the phrase they use really is a terrible phrase. They use the phrase social determinants of health. But what that really means is that health and jobs and social services and demographics and neighborhood and race are all connected. And they're finally beginning to see that. And so this is a moment to change things and to work together across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. And we definitely look forward to getting any of those resources that you can send as we frame our letter. And we will definitely make sure that we're collecting. This is the first conversation, as you know. We have another one scheduled for February 10th, and I'll let Melvette talk more about that, and then another at the beginning of March. For everyone who's here tonight, we want to say thank you, one, for joining us, but to let you know you're welcome to those conversations as well as to make sure anything that you wanted to say this evening, so you don't forget it, please put it in the chat before you go. I'm going to be turning things back over to Melvette, but I wanted to just share with you that your voice, as Elaine has articulated, is so important always, but particularly in this moment, because we are really in a place where we can impact and affect change by sharing our voice and what we need as parents leading for our children. So I want to thank all of you. There were about 80 something people at some point in this conversation. We've had partners here. We have board members. I want to say thank you to all of the board members who joined, Alan and Wendy. We have partners, I believe, like Yoli Flores. I don't know if she's still on for Campaign for Grade Level Reading, but all of you from all over the country, thank you, thank you, thank you. Melvette?
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Donna, and many thanks to our panelists. I know that many of you may have submitted questions or thoughts ahead of time, and certainly we are short on time. We can't get to everything and everyone, but there are opportunities where you can continue to share your questions with us and also your thoughts, your concerns, your issues. So the first way that you can use your voice is by completing the evaluation for tonight's event. And Carolyn is putting that in the chat. So we ask you to complete that. And there are some spaces where we've given you space to share with us, maybe some of those additional things that we might have missed or weren't able to address tonight. Secondly, we will be doing a follow-up email. We will be sending you a survey to make sure, again, that your voice, your opinions, your issues are captured. And so there'll be a survey that's coming out, because this will all feed into that letter, that open letter that we are preparing and looking for partners and parents to sign on to as a collective. And then the third way that we're continuing the conversation and ensuring that we are trying to reach as many parents across the country and the policy issues that concern them. If we could put up the slide, we are having our next parent policy table on February 10th, one back, right, on February 10th, and it's the same discussion. So here the caveat is that it will be in Spanish. So if you would like to join and you speak English, it will be the same rules that apply tonight. You can join and you just click the interpretation button where you can hear everything in English. But we will have Sulema Gomez will be the moderator. I'll be riding shotgun and trying to help out as much as I can, but we'll all be here in this space again. So we encourage you, we want to make sure that we reach those who speak Spanish, whose first language is Spanish. And maybe they weren't comfortable coming tonight, maybe they didn't know about it. So spread the word. February 10th, you'll see it on our Facebook pages, and we'll be promoting it on our website as well as through MailChimp. So make sure that if one of our team members can put our website address in there, it's www.parentswholead.org. You can go to our website, sign up for our mailings. We're looking forward to this conversation, and then we'll have another one, our final, or at least we think it's going to be our final parent policy table, Dear Mr. President, in March, early March. So there'll be an announcement coming out for that exact date. So if you have friends or family members or others that you feel should have been a part of this conversation tonight, you can tell them that they still have an opportunity to do that. And that's it for me. And then I want to invite Dominic, if we can go back to gallery view. Dominic, you had a comment. I asked you to pause on it. I'm not sure if you want to revisit it, but we have maybe a minute more that you'll have an opportunity to share. But I didn't want to leave it hanging out there since you're our honored, esteemed panelist.
I just wanted to read a definition of a livable wage, a living wage, and that's the part where we were on earlier. It says a living wage refers to a theoretical income level that allows individual or families to afford adequate shelter, food, and other basic necessities. The goal of a living wage is to allow employees to earn enough money for a satisfactory standard of living and to prevent them from falling into poverty. And our current minimum wage does not meet that. I can go on and on, but I just wanted to read that because whose standard? Because if we think about the current rate at $8, $7, whatever it is, what standard is that? You know? And then it says to prevent them from falling into poverty. Well, you're already at poverty. You're less than poverty at that rate. So I just wanted to share that definition.
Thank you. That was thank you for holding that close for us so that we could come back to it. That was worth it. Thank you. It was definitely worth the wait, Dominic. And so one of the things that we like to do in PLTI as we close out our time together is a leadership circle. And it's something that happens around the world. It's a peace process where you connect with others. And yes, thank you. You connect with others. Let's go off of the slide because I want to connect with others. So we connect with others. Let me just pause. Let's give a shout out to Carolyn Lee Davis, who's our producer of our event tonight. She is fabulous. She shows us a lot of grace. Thank you, Carolyn. And so we connect with others by making eye contact, which is fun in the Zoom space, right? Because all you're going to do is just stare into your camera. But you might look around your screen. You might actually scroll through some of the pages, and we connect with each other, right? And if we were in person, we would link arms or hold hands to feel that connection. And so we're connecting with each other in this space. And then we invite you, as you think about our time together tonight, to put one word in the chat that expresses your feelings, your thoughts at this moment. So we invite you to do that, and we'll translate that later because our translator is we're showing lots of love to you, Betty. We know you can't do all that there, but maybe Sulema, if you can translate maybe in real time some of the words you recognize. You can say those in Spanish. We could say some words in English to make sure that we're hearing the beautiful words that are coming from all of you. I saw impactful, hopeful, powerful. What are you seeing, Zulema? Grateful.
Yeah, inspiring.
En español, por favor.
Lots of hopefuls. Sorry.
Yeah, en español, no?
I am not that quick.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't putting you on the spot. It's fine, but you can keep reading some of them. And as we read them out, we thank you all for joining us tonight. This has been such a powerful discussion, being in this space with all of you. Let's give a round of applause, please, for our panelists. Let's see some hand clappings. Let's throw up some hearts. They were phenomenal. We hope that we see you again at one of the upcoming parent policy tables. We have them every other month. Usually that's our cadence. So always be on the lookout for them. And we hope that you have a wonderful evening. Zulema, do we have some music to send them out with?
We could do that, yes.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, mil gracias.
Mil gracias. And I don't know if she's still here, but I realize our other board member, Nadine, is here. So I want to shout her out.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you, Kevin.
And
and gentlemen.
Thank you. If our panelists can hang out with us if you're still here.
When I called for help, you didn't pick up your phone. You saw my kingly potential.